also want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in and listening to what I have to say. The phrase excellence is a habit is, well, I know it's significantly older than the first time I heard it. I first heard it from my coach when I was on the development team. And I think rather than just trying to unpack its meaning and analyze the quote itself, I think it'd be better to go through how it became important to me and the way I approach motivation and setting goals and all that good athlete stuff. And to do that, it is important, I think, to start with a little bit of backstory. One of the things I get asked most often, apart from what is Luge, which usually winds up with me kind of just asking if they've seen Cool Runnings and then working backwards from there, is how you get involved into a sport like Luge. And there's two answers to that. Is one, you have to grow up in a city that's hosted the Winter Olympics. We start recruiting at around 8 or 9 years old. So if you don't, start recruiting 8 or 9 years old, and by the time you're 15, you're kind of, to have a chance at a successful career, you need to be on the junior national team, getting some experience in Europe and racing on the tracks from lower start heights. So if you don't grow up in a city that has the facilities, it's pretty hard to get involved in the sport. Second is, you got to like going fast. I have always loved going fast. When I was growing up, I was always looking for the steepest hill I could find to ride my bike down. And anytime I went family ski trips, I was all French fries and no pizza. So my parents picked up on the trend, and they, when they came across a Discover Luge camp at Canada Olympic Park here in Calgary, they signed me up, partially because they thought I'd enjoy it, but I think mostly just to get me out of their hair for an afternoon. I fell in love with it immediately, and apparently I did well enough to be asked back to a recruitment camp that fall where I made the Canadian novice team. It is important to know at this point that my career did not start out with Olympic aspirations. And I know this particularly because by the time 2002 had rolled around, I had been involved in luge and Olympic sport for a couple of years. And the only thing I remember from the Salt Lake City Olympics was how big of a crush I had on Katrina Maydome. I was just totally lost in the joy of getting to go fast. It could be -20 and blowing snow, and I would just be sitting there on the side of a hill with a big smile on my face, waiting for track is clear for Tristan Walker and getting that green light and getting to go down the hill. It wasn't really until a couple of years later when I first made the Canadian junior national team that changed. It wasn't winning the selection race. It wasn't when the team was announced. It was getting the jacket. That jacket with the big red maple leaf on the back of it suddenly made me realize how much more sliding could be. Up until that point, it was tobogganing. And the jacket made me realize that I was part of something bigger. It brought out this competitive side of me that I didn't really know existed, and it made racing almost as much fun as going fast. I loved it. I loved everything about it. I particularly loved that the Canadians were the underdogs. At that time, still to this day, seeing a maple leaf on the podium was a very rare and very special thing, and it made it even that much more special when it was there because of me. That first real season kind of transformed me from into a real athlete, and I wanted to be the best. So by the time 2006 rolled around, I was definitely paying attention. I watched people that I actually knew compete on the world stage at the Olympics, the highest level of competition you can get, and that's when I decided that I really wanted to be an Olympian. Fast forward to 2009. My doubles partner and I had just won a bronze medal at the Junior World Championships in Nagano, Japan, which had caught the attention of our senior head coach of the national team. He invited us to race the Senior Canadian Championships that year, and that was going to be in Whistler on the track that would host the Olympics the following February. In a bit of a surprise upset, we ended up winning a silver medal. And by the time the dust had settled, we looked at each other and said, we're second to Canada. There's 2 spots on the Olympics team. Like, we actually have a shot here. That summer, after that, we were invited to train with the senior national team, and the next year we became the youngest Canadian doubles team to ever compete for Canada at the Olympics. Being brought up from the junior team for the 2010 games was more about experience than ever really being expected to win a medal. We placed a respectable 15th for having 3 years of junior racing still to go. But more importantly, I had my eyes open to what the Olympics was all about. All of that competitive drive and the desire to represent Canada well in front of the world that I had developed as a junior athlete was kind of consolidated and fixed in place and left me with the goal of winning a medal at the Olympics. We developed a ton over the next 4 years. And although Canada solidly maintained an underdog status, our hard work had put us in a position where people were starting to take notice. By 2014, Justin and I were hot off of Canada's first ever World Cup doubles medal, and the team relay squad was consistently on the podium. I think we were ranked second in the world going into the 2014 Olympics. So it culminated in a lot of hype around the potential for Canada's first ever Olympic medal in luge. We worked our asses off. Everyone was super ready. Everyone was at the top of their game, and we wanted it really, really, really badly. We ended up fourth in both events. One was 1/10 of a second off the podium, and the other one was half of that at 5/100ths of a second on the podium. That stung. That was really tough. Actually, when I got back to the ice the next season, it wasn't quite the same. The 5/100ths of a second kind of haunted me. There was the thought of getting all the way back to Pyeongchang and needing to relive the heartbreak was almost crippling. And it seemed like the harder that I worked, the worse I did. We were working harder than ever before and taking steps backwards, and seemed like the more I wanted it, the worse the sliding got. And eventually I kind of got hooked on the idea that I had peaked. That was pretty damaging, but I think having that idea that you've peaked, like every athlete has to have a peak in their career, and maybe ours was 4th place in 2014. I had all but decided that it would be easier to just walk away than go through it all again and not achieve that goal of winning an Olympic medal. Being an athlete had been a part of my life for so long that it was as much a part of me as my name was, and I was really close to leaving it all behind on extremely bad terms. So how do you go from there to standing on the Olympic podium 2 years later? Because the thing is, there wasn't even anything that I had done particularly wrong in Sochi. I had great races, I had the skill, I had the athleticism, I executed well, the runs were great. And the truth is that 5/100ths of a second is a third of a blink of an eye, and anything could have made the difference. So the first step to being able to get back into podium capable performances is realizing that while anything could have made the difference, there is really only a handful of things that you have direct control over. I didn't come to that realization on my own. I did some work with the sports psych and coaches and a lot of developing on it. I'm still working on it. I probably will be, but accepting that there are things outside of your control was so important to me that it actually changed the way I set goals. The one shining goal, the objective of my entire athletic career was to win a medal at the Olympics. It turns out that's not a very good goal, because a good goal is something that you and only you can control. And when it comes down to it, there are a ton of different things going on in a sport like luge. This person has illegal suspension in their sled. A country has been systematically doping their national team for the better part of a decade, and no one really seems to be doing anything about it. Not pointing any fingers, naming any names. The weather, it's an outdoor sport. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it snows, sometimes it's way warmer or colder than you were expecting it to be, and sometimes you just get unlucky. this concept right now is very poignant because I don't know if you've heard about it. There's this thing going around called COVID-19. It's this thing, and it might make it so I don't even have a World Cup season this year. But I don't really have control over that. So again, really putting to the test that ability to let things go that are outside your control and just focus on what you can control. I think winning an Olympic medal was definitely still the dream, but I changed the goal to something that I could control. I changed it from winning an Olympic medal to giving myself the best chance to win an Olympic medal. This was really big for me because it allowed me to kind of finally change everything that was bad about those 500ths of a second into proper motivation. And for me particularly, I think this is where the concept of excellence being a habit really started to hit home. The essence of that mindset is that excellence isn't a tap that you can turn on and off. And it's something that you have to practice daily and consistently. So it's not just something that you say, I'm going to be excellent on race day. So instead of trying harder while I was racing, I put the effort into what I could control, and that was the preparation. Dryland training was the perfect place to focus that motivation. Twice a day, 5 days a week, all summer long, going to the gym and executing every set, every rep, like each one was the difference between fourth place and a medal at the Olympics. Things like sled work, usually boring and repetitive, became cathartic with every stroke polishing the runners. Maybe this is the 500ths. You can kind of knock down those 500ths of a second one at a time. I think I used to remember the 2.52 times 10 to the power of 9 it's close. That's the number of times 500ths of a second goes into 4 years. So when you start thinking about it like that, that's the number of opportunities that you have to take another 500ths of a second off of your time at the next Olympics. So it got to the point where I just really was able to learn to trust the process. And eventually I got to the point where I could sit at the start at the Olympics knowing that I had done everything I could to be the best athlete I could be on that day, and the outcome of the race couldn't change that. So the concept of excellence being a habit is just, it's mostly that there are many things that you can do to have your 500ths of a second be either a positive or a negative. And for the most part, and particularly in today's environment, it is going to come down to focusing on what you can control. That's a good question. How much are your runners / sled? That's one of the things I know Canadians don't really understand what goes into a luge sled. So that's thank you very much for the question, because it's a huge part of the sport, the technology. It's not really exaggerating saying it's closer to Formula One on ice than your average tobogganing hill. There's a lot of technology and a lot of R&D that goes into the sleds, and it's very expensive. And that's one of the things that Can Fund absolutely has helped with over the years, is pushing to get some better equipment, developing some equipment. So it is very expensive. What advice would you give to someone going to their first Olympic Games? Take in as much of it as you can. It's going to be, I know not everyone was in the very lucky position that I was in, where we got brought up from the junior team with very little to no pressure on us to perform. It was specifically a thing that our head coach of the national team does to allow athletes to see the spectacle of the Olympics before they really need to be on it. But either way, it's amazing and huge and eye-opening. And when your event is done, go watch other events. Go try to be as much of a part of everything as possible. It's just incredible. If you've made it to your first Olympic Games, all your mental performance, all of your all the things you need to do performance-wise at the Olympics, but let it be an experience for you outside of that as well. It would be my biggest piece of advice. Max speed, the fastest I've ever gone is 151 kilometers an hour. That's in Whistler, and that was before they closed the top of the track. So I don't know if anyone's going to go that fast again, but that was some real sliding going off the top in Whistler. What habits did you adjust after the mindset shift? The little things and trying to everything be the best it could be. Like I said, kind of focusing more on the individual components rather than the overall thing. You can go to the gym and have a workout and think you have a great workout. But if you're not focusing on the purpose behind every movement, those things could add up, and they could absolutely add up to be the 500ths of a second. The team dynamic between me and Justin, it's interesting. It's there's a lot of different team dynamics for double sliders on the circuit, and you can really see when people aren't getting along. It suffers in the sliding, in the results and in the quality of the sliding. And I think one of the things, Justin and I competed against each other as singles before we were paired up on the junior team, and we kind of kept that competitive drive between us. There's always some stuff that we try to outdo each other with, but it's also, we've just managed to find a groove really that works well for the both of us, and acknowledging that when we do get upset with each other, it's usually something else. It's if we're not sliding well, if we're having problems, if the sled's slow, then it took us a little while to figure it out, but it's usually never something personal between us. It's more the frustration with sliding can manifest itself in the relationship, and realizing that was an important step to being able to really have the good relationship that we have had as long as we did. None of us can control the fact that there's a global pandemic on right now, but you can control the little things. You can control, like an athlete, your nutrition, getting some exercise as best you can. I know no one's getting huge on body weight circuits and bands, but it's just there's a lot of little things, and sometimes the little things can make the difference. I'm staying home for my brother-in-law is a nurse in the pulmonary unit at the Peter Lockheed Hospital here in Calgary. So I would say that I am staying home for Josh, my brother-in-law. Thank you very much. See you guys.